Hello guys, it's Claymore here, and welcome back to the CLAYCAST. A week or two a little late, but as you've probably seen by the video title, yeah. Something pretty major happened to me in my life recently, and this is something that I had to really kind of like divert a lot of energy to, away from streaming, YouTubing, and so on. This is something that really meant a lot to me, but more importantly, it meant a lot to my family too. And that was my driving test. I had it on March the 11th. About 10 days ago now, and it's been an interesting time. It has been. I think in total, just to kind of preface all this a little bit, I think in total I've had about 7 or 8 months worth of lessons. I think it was like a couple of months break between them. I think it was mostly for like a money and time reason, that kind of thing, but I got back into it for the new year. But yeah, decided to go with an instructor that actually taught both my brothers, my younger and my older brother, and went with him. He had a manual car, and the family car is an electric automatic. So originally it was kind of hard to bounce between these two cars, right? And obviously, to start with, I really did favor, and I still kind of do to now, still really favor the automatic over the manual. And at one point I was genuinely debating swapping over to a different instructor who had an automatic car. But for those of you who don't know, at least here in the UK, what we do is essentially, if you do your test in an automatic vehicle, you can only drive automatic vehicles. You can't drive manuals. Your license doesn't cover that. But if you were to do it the other way around and do your test in a manual, you can drive both cars. Even if manuals are apparently not going to be really around much in the next 10 years or so, if you believe in all the news and stuff like that, it's nice now knowing that I can cover both those cars in case of an emergency, or if my first car ends up being a manual anyways. So, my instructor was fantastic. He was really good. His style of teaching really suited me well. He gave me a lot of control of what I really wanted to get done and focus on, and then he'd chip in and chime in and stuff like that. And, he would do a very good job of putting me in the deep end as well. Like, as soon as we essentially mastered something, we would move on to the next thing, and he would really kind of like drop me in it, see if I sunk or swam, and depending on what the outcome, then we'd get feedback and stuff like that. It was a good way of teaching, it really was. So about 8 months or so of lessons passed, and I did my theory way before then too. I think I did my theory about a year ago now. I got like 89% of my theory. And so we were doing some mock tests, and I passed 2 and failed 1 before the actual test itself. Luckily, the main mistakes were isolated incidents that kind of just happened out of their own accord, something I can easily lock down. And then the test happened. It was very early in the morning. As a lot of you know, I'm not a morning person. I'm really not, but I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning that day. I tried getting as good a sleep as possible, and I guess I did get as good a sleep as possible because of what happened later. Had an hour with my instructor before then, and got into the vehicle for my test. I was nervous, but I was also quite resolved going in there. I knew that I had essentially put the time in. It wasn't just the lessons I was driving. I was driving pretty much damn near every single day of the week for several months onwards. I would drive back and forth from work. I would drop people off and pick them up. Obviously, with people still in the car. I would do supermarket trips, do errands, etc. I would get as much driving in as I possibly could. And the more driving I did in the manual, the better I felt to the automatic too. More confidence, and then obviously because you're not fiddling with the clutch as much, I have way more kind of like focus in an automatic to focus on the road around me, increase my awareness, and so on. The instructor we had, the test instructor I had, I think he was pretty cool. I think he was absolutely fair. He chatted to me a little bit during the test itself, but for the most part, it went pretty well. I got 7 minors, one of which technically shouldn't have been on there, but I'll get to that soon. I think there was like a mirror check, a wrong turn, even though it was communicated to me when the turn was. It was the beginning of the test, so I had nerves. I had 2 stalls, and bear in mind, I haven't stalled in this car for months now, because 2 had to happen in the test. And I think there was, I was a little bit too high speed. I should have dropped down the first gear from second gear when I was near a lorry, basically. And then there was another mirror check that could have been thrown in at the end. Not a big one, but just a small one. And then when the instructor asked me to operate my demisters, I operated them, but he didn't count it because he thought that the only reason why he thought that the button in the car itself that operated the demisters only operated the front ones when they actually operate both back and rear windows. And we covered this at the end of the test. My instructor actually got a bit annoyed at this. But once it's down on paper, they can't do anything, and it didn't really affect the outcome anyways. So not a big deal. The show me, that was the show me question. The tell me question was regarding to tire pressure and how I'd reliably check it. I knew the answer to that right at the beginning. That was good. There was one thing about throughout the test though that I was really that's when the pressure started going on. As I stated, I stalled twice during that, the first 10 or 15 minutes of the test. Nerves. Over here in the UK, you can have 15, I think it's 15 minors of any category. But the moment you get more than 2 minors in a single category, it becomes a pattern, and that makes it into a major automatically. And you get one single major in a driving test, you're done. You failed. So, second stall came in, and the pressure was on. It really was on. I think I got a bit lucky with the maneuvers he asked me to do. I did I think it was 3 park up on the lefts, and then 1 park up on the right. And then a couple of left and right bay parks and stuff like that. I didn't get any reversing maneuvers, even though we did get a reverse 2 car lengths maneuver, but that one's easy. But luckily, no parallel reverse or proper reverse. I'm still working on that. I think most people are still working on that, to be fair, from what I've asked around at. And the driving test we pulled back into the test center, and he told me, "I'm very pleased to tell you passed your test today." And I tell you what, before I even considered doing my theory or driving test, I had absolutely no interest in driving. Absolutely no interest. My reasoning for it being was that, what would I drive for? You know what I mean? It was a really unhealthy way to think, to be fair, because that left a lot of the pressure and a lot of the energy and stuff like that on my family, because they would do a lot of the shopping trips, picking me up, dropping me off and stuff like that, and it was grating them down. So it was actually my older brother who pushed me into doing this. Took a bit convincing, but I did it. And passed my theory, and then got straight into lessons. So I had no interest in driving whatsoever. And then when I heard those words that I passed my driving test, I swear, the best description I could think of was just all the stress leaving my body at once, and then the realization settling in of how many doors that just opened for me. I think that was the really nice feeling, was just understanding and knowing right then and there that way more opportunities were open to me. And even better yet, just to top this all off, the usual way you would get your driving license properly, here in the UK at least, is you take your provisional, you pick up a form, you sign it all off and stuff like that, you proof of that you pass your test and send it all off, and they'll send you back your proper driving license. But that wasn't the case. They actually just took my provisional off me, which is the license before the driving license here in the UK. Took my provisional off me right then and there in the car, and then he took it off. 20 working days, and I got it in 3 working days. I was very happy with that. And since then, nearly every single day I've been doing solo drives. I've been to the supermarket several times. I've driven back and forward to work on my own several times. Of course, when I did a solo trip to the Mackey's drive-thru, naturally. I went to go get my hair done the other day. Drove to there too, on my own. Yeah, it was really, really good. And I will say that to start off with, driving on my own was way, 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 way scarier. Way scarier than the test ever could be. Genuinely. I found driving on my own way more intimidating. But obviously that only really comes with time and experience, and yeah, those nerves are slowly going away, it feels like. Yeah, so being able to drive is a really big thing. And I'm already feeling a little bit different than I usually am from before. I guess a wider perspective on things, or, and I did reflect on this a little bit as well, the fact that, at the end of the day, I passed my driving test at 29 years old. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be saying, people pass the test in their mid-30s, early 40s, even late 40s and stuff. And, I get that there's no time frame to do that, but obviously, in my and my family's case, we've had a bit of a different origin, I guess you could say. We had a house fire that completely crippled us in every way possible. It took us a very long time to recover from that. But I definitely had opportunities to do driving lessons, get this ball rolling when I was early 20s. Now, as much as I do feel like I definitely could have done, I also generally think that this was the right time to do it. Because, when you do pass your driving test as a solo driver or even like a younger person, I feel like you're a bit more reckless when you're younger. Naturally, most people are, and I feel like, more people get into trouble on their own and driving, And my younger brother, for example, he got his driving done, I think, when he was early 20s as well. And not long from then, he got caught for speeding. Regardless of that, I think my point I'm trying to make here is that I think it felt like this was the right time to do it. Because I'm not driving any differently now than I was doing in my tests. And I don't really intend to change anything. I don't intend to push any limits or lines. I don't change anything about my driving. I'm a very good driver, according to people. Family obviously going to tell me I'm a good driver, but generally speaking, I'm also quite cautious. Not cautious as in I'll slow down in any scenario, but I'm also not in a rush if there's something strange in front of me, and I want to make sure I get as much information as I can before moving in. So yeah, passing my driving test. That was a very, very big thing. It took up a lot of my energy and attention for the last 3 or 4 weeks. We're over that now. I uploaded recently a video related to the Pro-Web event happening in the Cycle Frontier right now, and that's doing pretty well. Obviously, this episode of the CLAYCAST here and now as well. I intend to do the next CLAYCAST a couple weeks into Season 3 of the Cycle Frontier. I'm going to probably bring some of my long-time playing friends in. I'm thinking maybe Yakubamba and Sayin. We can get them both in on the CLAYCAST so we can really have a good talk, an honest talk about how the season is feeling so far, how is it going, what needs to change, what still needs to come, and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's going to be ideally the next CLAYCAST I'm going to do. But yeah. Speaking of Cycle, there's going to be another video coming soon about whether or not I think Cycle Season 3 will succeed. I won't talk too much about that because that will be for a different video, but I did want to actually cover a little bit of the PTR that happened not too long ago. I think about a week or so ago. So for those of you who didn't know, Season 3 public test round went up. It was public. Anybody could play it and try it out. And there was a lot of new changes and stuff like that people could try out. The main critical changes were the introduction of the Howler, which, from a previous video, you guys should have already seen. The introduction of the new and improved hub. So the hub feels way more alive now, way more improved. Generally feels actually like stuff is happening in it rather than it's just an empty void. And a lot of gameplay and campaign changes. And then the economy as well, obviously. And I think the general reception to the PTR, myself included, is that the PTR was good. A lot of really good things happened in it. A lot of really good changes were in there. The free loadout runs were great. The loadout presets were great. Did a bit more work here and there, but just having a preset for loadouts is incredible. A lot of really, really cool changes. The MK1 and MK2 guns, I think there's some more work that he's doing there. But for the most part, I see the intention of them. I appreciate that that we have more encouragement to go and loot these MK2 versions of the guns. But also we have some cheaper, more budget-based guns to fall back onto of current variants of the guns if we'd like to. I do like that. The Howler as well is shaping up to be really, really cool. It's very different from previous test builds in a good way. The gameplay it provides it's interesting until it gets to half health, but it starts going pretty nuts and it starts using its main attack, which really, really hurts. It definitely controls the battlefield, but it doesn't dominate it, if that makes sense. And I'll explain what I mean by this. When we attacked the Howler and stuff like that, and they were coming to a fight, and then we would get involved in a fight, as much as the Howler was a nuisance, we could technically still fight each other underneath the Howler when it's over our heads and stuff like that. Like, you can still PvP in the Howler. It just added extra layers of difficulty that you could still navigate around. It just required you to be on point, and being able to come out on top of a PvP situation with this difficulty modifier felt really, really great. It was really intense too. They've really got a nice tuned spot right now with the Howler where the attacks it does, at least in the first half of its health, they're dangerous, but they're not like, okay, if I take my eye off it for a second, it's going to really, really rinse me. I think they definitely nailed the difficulty between a Jeffrey and a Marauder kind of deal like they were aiming for. Like, the Howler's very, very good right now. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to add further layers of gameplay on when we start getting the quests for it and stuff. Definitely looking forward to that. As for the economy, this is a tricky one because generally speaking, the main issue that we, myself included, had during the Season 1 and Season 2 is that we just didn't have enough to spend our money on. The only things we really could spend our money on was crafting and buying guns, but we could easily make more than enough money to cover that and still start accumulating an absurd amount of wealth. There just wasn't enough to buy. So with the PTR, it introduced a bunch of money sinks and stuff like that that would generally drain it, and it remains to be seen if it's too much or not, but we'll see, obviously. But essentially, these money sinks could be ammo repair is a little bit more expensive. There are different types of ammo now to run for your guns, depending on the quality of them. So, like, for example, a blue gun will probably need blue ammo, which was more expensive than regular ammo. The regular variants of guns now cost scrip, so you're going to be spending scrip as well doing that. You do get a very respectable amount of scrip from your main story missions and hard jobs as well, at least. So that's good. That's going to limit the amount of really high-end games people run. The rest remains to be seen, really, right? In terms of the rewards we get from factions and stuff, from quests and everything. But there are good basics in place to make sure that there's not going to be any super rich people for the first, at least for the first few months. We don't know what it's going to be like down the line yet. That being said, there does generally seem to be a consensus as well that there are things in the cycle that aren't quite or don't feel like they're going to be ready in time for Season 3. One such system that I'm pretty sure nearly everybody by this point is talking about is armor and guns even, and how they essentially, unless they are sold, have a permanent place in the economy. Now, obviously, I think what happens, generally speaking, when you start upgrading your armor tiers and you reliably start crafting blues or purples, is that you start selling all your old gear, which is fine. That takes that out the equivalent, but the majority of the time, minimum purple stuff is taken out, and it's sat in a stash, and then it's used, and then it's taken away by another player, and then it keeps going around and run around, whilst more purple armor is being looted and crafted and given through battle pass and faction rewards and stuff like that. The problem is right now is that armor permanently loops around the economy. And an armor degradation system, like what Tarkov has, I think is the only way to really fix this. Essentially, what I mean by armor degradation is that you will use it, it will take damage, you will repair it, but the repair value won't match the original value. So slowly over time, the armor will get consistently weaker, or at least in terms of durability, which means that like if you take 10 shots and it depletes, fine. Then you repair it over time, then it'll take 5 shots to deplete. As an example, I'm not saying that's like what it is in the PTR right now, that's just an example. So yeah, this would help get rid of a lot of the armor in the economy. But more importantly, it would make more players farm materials to craft. It would improve the importance of crafting across the board as well. But it would just make these loadouts that people run, a bit more valuable. Like if you craft an exo set and you keep using it, and then it gets worn away, you're fully aware by that point that if you get rid of it, it's going to be, a little bit of time at least before you can replace it outright. So an armor degradation system would definitely need to be in place for the changes coming up. Aside from that, generally things look pretty good. Obviously bugs and stuff like that hopefully will be sorted out before the season begins. There are a fair degree of bugs to come still. And I don't doubt there's going to be stuff that will need to be fixed during Season 3 anyways. Looping back around to that point with the economy, you can only really test the economy so much in simulations. This could be in-house simulations like on computers and stuff like that. Or actually having like a public test realm where it's not really a live environment, and you don't have nearly as many players as you would do during a live server to really see if it's going to hold strong. So the economy we're going to have to release on live servers and see how it goes and tweak it at that point. There's not really much I can think about that that's necessarily concerning me. Things look generally pretty good. But like I said, I'll cover more details and go into more details about what's coming in Season 3 in this other video that I'm going to do. But yeah, I just wanted to generally recap on this and say how I personally feel like Season 3 is in a pretty good place. We just need more momentum with things. We need to make sure we lock certain things down before Tharis unlocks, because Tharis is going to be locked for the first maybe 30 to 50 days. I don't know the exact value yet, but 30 to 50 days, Tharis is not going to be available, which means that when it does come available and we have access to the Forge and an increase in the gear economy, we need certain things to be in place before then. So yeah. In terms of something else I wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about a little bit going over the topic of, which is interesting to talk about, the topic of cheesing in video games and how it was really, really, I think, shone a light in Psycho Frontier over the duration of Season 2. So, the definition of cheese in a video game. So, cheesing could be something as broad as maybe doing something to your movement or hitbox that makes you consistently harder to hit at the cost of a few button presses. It could be accessing a spot that you wouldn't usually be able to get up to anyways, or it could be even using a gun that currently is far too overtuned. Examples of cheese. I think cheese to a degree in most games is inevitable. It's going to happen. I roll my eyes often at cheesy things like this. Like, for example, a very big topic of conversation amongst the player base, and especially the high end of the player base or the PvPers, is the impact of jump shooting, bunny hopping during PvP right now. And the topic came up of the jump shot in the PTR at least feeling weak, nerfed heavily. I would actually say a bit too heavily nerfed in some cases, like the shotgun, for example. The crosshairs are like here on your screen, but when you jump, they're like out there. A little bit excessive, I think, but generally, as a principle, I do like the fact that this was nerfed. The reason that I like that this was nerfed is because nearly every single fight would revolve into who would jump and shoot the most. That's just how it is. Slight jumping around corners is obviously something else there as well. It would make you way harder to hit, and the other target who's likely going to be stationary is easy to hit. And just bunny hopping in the middle of fighting whilst your bullets are pretty much going straight forward with very small deviations. You know, it's not really a skillful thing to do. Now, obviously, there are definitely high tier layers of movement and gunplay that are only really accessible to people who really put the time in to learn them and stuff like that. Genuine high skill cap things, and if you run into someone doing this, it's fair play, right? But the topic of jump shooting came up, and how a lot of the high-end PvPers are quite upset about this change, and how their argument was that, you know, the jump shooting in general added a layer of difficulty, well, not difficulty, but a layer of strategy, I guess you could say, onto endgame PvP as a whole. Now, my only counter to this is, how can we say something raises the skill gap? How can we say something like this is going to be difficult to achieve for a lot of players when it's only the difference of pressing one button? You know, it's not like Tarkov where, you know, you're using Q and E leaning, you're maybe alt stepping, side stepping, you're also overhead shooting or sideways shooting, you know. You're just pressing a button over and over again, and it doesn't really affect anything. You're not taking away from any other hands or buttons on your keyboard and mouse. You're just pressing the jump space button over and over again. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'd be all for something if it was, you know, hard to master but achievable, and definitely not cheesy. Like, it required a lot of attention and skill to master, but I just don't see this point with jump shotting. I just don't. And then at the end of the day, a lot of the fighting would boil down to who would jump shot the most, rather than, okay, maybe I should reposition and try and find a different angle and just try and outshoot the guy. Or maybe I should try and do a quick peek and a quick shot, see if I can maybe get a lucky headshot and open up a push. You know, A lot of these other possible tactics which still are done are being overshadowed by this. And this is my issue. Is the fact that it all devolved down to jump shotting. That's an example of cheese, in my opinion. At least in my definition of cheese. Now, that's one thing. This is obviously something that was intended by the devs, but then they're going to tune down over time. It's the same thing that they've done for grenade spamming. Grenade spamming was very, 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 very intense early on in Season 1, Season 2 as well, but luckily it was nerfed a bit. Other things as well, gun balance has never been felt so good. The Brute used to dominate, now it doesn't. It still dominates CQB, but now it doesn't rival the core in medium range. The Arbiter feels better now, like you still hit someone in the head with a purple helmet, they're going to fucking hurt, but it doesn't feel so cheap now, and it's still an expensive gun to run. The Basilisk feels a bit better too, it needs a bit more work, but yeah, the gun balance, generally speaking, right now is in a really good place. Not much cheese to be had there. Now, we move on to things that I would say fall into the realms of abusing or exploiting unintentional features or mechanics in the game to get an advantage. This is what I call abusing or exploiting. An example of this could be glitching your way out of the edges of the map to gain an extremely unfair, very high cover advantage over players surface level. I'm not talking about verticality, I'm talking about straight up breaking the map, glitching yourself out of the boundaries of the map to get an advantage. Stuff that the devs have very clearly stated that it's non-intentional across the board, not just for just this, but for other things too, and they don't want players doing it. Stuff like that. Another example could be using certain mechanics in the game that very clearly have a problem with them, but this problem gives that person a very unfair advantage. An example of this is early Hunter Vision. Hunter Vision obviously is very, very strong, but there used to be a glitch you could do with it, where if you either ADS down a certain way and swept over the map, you could very barely see people from across the map, whilst the Hunter Vision should only have been covering like within 15 to 20 meters of you. Example of that. Now, the Hunter Vision was actually disabled. It was re-released a few times in a poor state, but then it was disabled permanently whilst they really tried to figure it out and lock it down. So that's an example of it. So something that was very clearly not intentional. So either the devs are trying to fix it or they're going to disable it until it is fixed. Now, a big example of this as well is the mineral scanner. And this is something I had a very recent experience with, unfortunately. Even with 8-9 days to go before the season wipe, people are still abusing this. So the mineral scanner, what you can do with this mineral scanner is essentially use it in the midst of, with the aid of smoke grenades, and the terrain sweeping effect, that line that kind of goes over people. For some reason or other, this terrain sweeping effect highlights players through smoke. And essentially, through smoke allows the player who you just used the mineral scanner to essentially see them without the need of any aid. Now, the issue with this specifically is that Jaeger actually said they're okay leaving this in the game for the time being, but they're going to keep an eye on it. This is what they said in recent patch notes. But the issue here is that it is a mineral scanner. It's not a prospector scanner. It's not an anti-smoke scanner. It is a mineral scanner. And the aid of having, and if you haven't used smoke grenades in Cycle yet, they're pretty good. Like they obscure your vision really, really well in a big dome area effect and stuff. Like you can't look through them. Whereas with a mineral scanner, it's made very easy. Now, bear in mind two things too, as well as the fact that it's just a mineral scanner. It shouldn't detect players. Is that it is extremely cheap and available straight from the start, as are smoke grenades, which are also cheap and available from the start. I can't sit here and actually say, in accordance with the logic that Jaeger have used for other things, the Hunter Vision included, and how they've tripped that and disabled it because it wasn't working as intended, that this mineral scanner thing is intended. I know they said they leave it in the game for the time being. I don't think that's because they believe it's intentional. I personally believe it's because they have Season 3 around the corner. It's a way more pressing issue. There's a lot more bigger issues in Season 3 too. But this is an example. And it is unfortunate that a lot of 3-mans are utilizing this right now. And like I said, we ran into one recently. And they did ultimately kill us and pushed us because of this advantage. And, you know, I think right now is the general approach Jaeger have had with people who abuse or exploit things like out-of-bounds areas or glitches on certain things is by either giving them a warning or by temporarily banning them. So this could be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, etc. Repeat offenders would get, more days. But it would generally generate a lot of good faith in the community because they receive the message loud and clear that this is not okay to do in accordance with terms and conditions and rule and community guidelines. But also, if you didn't know this, players who are banned, even temporarily, that triggers the cheater compensation system to kick in. So if you did die to someone who was abusing or glitching, not cheating, and their accounts were suspended, you would get the loadout back, which you lost to them. So this is generally a really good system to kind of work with when it comes to this. But it does seem like this loops back around to the whole point of the segment, and it's that cheesing and abusing and exploiting in video games across the board right now just seems to be the norm in PvP games. It seems to be the norm. We saw this in Tarkov, more often than not. People from years ago abusing glitches and bugs that would essentially make them invincible. This could be the factory office bug or the Gate 3 factory bug. It could be audio bugs where they would glitch themselves so that their steps would not actually recognize on the floor layer, so their audio wouldn't trigger. And more recently than not, people found out a way to replicate the glitch where your character would be invisible to the majority, if not all, the other players in your server, so you could just go around freely getting kills. There are always players who will do and abuse anything they absolutely can to gain an edge in these games. Now, more often than not, these edges are because the game is very unforgiving or very punishing when you die. And as much as I would like to try and find a degree of sympathy for people frustrated with these games, or maybe they're not meant for them, or maybe they're just stubborn and they can't try and get over this hurdle they have with the game right now, so they resort to doing this stuff. I don't know. I don't know what the reason it could be. But it just seems to me that every PvP game I play right now is this element is way more consistent than previously. Even going back to the old days in Tarkov, it didn't feel like it was there as much. Save for Cycle, really. But even then, in Cycle, in the closed betas, you still had people pushing out to bounds areas and getting the advantages there. And it's really weird to me how the attitude of a lot of people is to this. And that seems to be boiled down to a few different mindsets. The first one being that if it's in the game, it's okay to do it. And if the devs care, they'd fix it. Until that point, I'm going to abuse it. Or skill issue. That's my favorite one. It's interesting to me how this is very widely accepted across the board. It's interesting to me how abusing or glitching in a video game is fine because you can do it in there. And if you have a problem with it, it's a skill issue. It's really interesting to me, and especially when you start touring the territory of punishing these players for doing this, suddenly it's a very, very big deal. And a lot of people have a lot of issues with this and saying, how do they know it's a big deal? How do they know? They're very clearly doing it. Maybe if they know it's not, you shouldn't do it, then they won't do it. But the problem is it's not as simple as that. The problem is that it's not a case of, them not knowing. The majority of the time, in my opinion, I think it's a case that they do know. They do know what they're doing. They do know that it's not intentional, but they do it anyways because they want to win. And I just find that so strange, and, well, I'll be honest with you, I find it really pathetic too. I want to win in video games. I absolutely want to win. I want to do the best I can. And sometimes I misplay. And sometimes I'm frustrated. Sometimes we get heated, like most gamers do. But then we always come back to it thinking, yeah, well, I'll just be better next time. There's not much else I can do there. Intel. Shut up. But yeah, I mean, it's just so bizarre to me how this is such a widely accepted approach to PvP games. And people will die on these hills. People will defend this to their last breath about how this is okay, because if the devs cared, they would have patched it out already. It's such a bizarre excuse, and it's honestly the logic they use, that the fact that they can do it, so they are going to do it. The logic that they use there is honestly quite concerning, because more often than not, when a human being runs by a degree of logic, they apply that degree of logic to other things in their lives. So, yeah, it's not a good line of logic to run by, especially outside of gaming. a degree of psychology there, I guess, that I definitely don't have the experience and professional degree for. But yeah, cheating and abusing in video games, it seems to be way too much of a common thing. And what I respect Jaeger for is that they have communicated a lot with the honest players, the honest PvPers in their game, and they've cracked down on these people. There was a very, especially when out of bounds areas were a big thing. When out of bounds areas were a very big focal point within the community, within Cycle, at some point in Season 2, they were communicating really well about it. They were telling people, and making announcements and saying, if you are in one of these spots and you are a repeat offender, you will receive a temporary suspension. They were clear about it. And at the end of the day, once a dev has drawn the line in the sand somewhere within their game, that line can't be crossed. And people can whine and complain about it all they like, but it ultimately doesn't matter. If a game dev has told you, no, this is bad, don't do it, or we'll be forced to react. That's it. It's house rules, right? You don't go into someone's house and do whatever you want there. You respect the person's boundaries. It's their home, so you respect the house rules. The degree of entitlement here is absurd, and it really, really is just so bizarre to me that people would go this far to win. And the even more bizarre thing to me is doing this so close to a seasonal wipe. That to me is strange. When you have 8 days left, why bother doing it? But then the same thing can be said for people who hire RMT boosters and carries, which we have run into as well over the last few days. It's wiping in 8 days. Why are you paying an RMT booster to carry you? It's all gone in 8 days. It's interesting. I wish, there could be some kind of technology where I could link my brain to theirs so I could really try and get an understanding of where they're coming from and their intentions and stuff. I don't think their intentions are good, though. But don't get me wrong, I think a lot of the time people do these things without realizing they're naughty. But, I think I've played long enough to know that a lot of the intentions of these specific players usually aren't that great. But yeah, something else I wanted to talk about. I don't see this happening much, hopefully, for Season 3. I'm hoping a lot of the out-of-bounds spots were covered in Season 2. Not much has changed with the maps. Some areas have been tweaked here and there, but no changes that I could foresee creating new out-of-bounds spots. A lot of the gun balances have been sorted out now, so there's a bit of more variety when it comes to guns currently, especially the exotic, which is good. It remains to be seen about the economy, though. We don't know. The insurance as well, the insurance being changed so that the regular insurance that you pay KMax for is now only valid for one raid at a time rather than permanently. I think that's good. That'll prevent a bunch of stuff that happening too. Yeah. Some really strange stuff in the regular player's mind, and I'll never relate to it. I'm by no means amazing at Cycle. I think that the game does have a very high skill cap when it comes to the recoil of guns and stuff like that. Even I'm not fully mastered the recoil of guns yet, and there are definitely a lot of deaths that I've had that are bound down to being misplaying or just up against someone who shot better than me. But yeah, when it does come to stuff like cheese and exploiting things and stuff like that, I am very vocal about it. I do make an effort to try and contact the player and make sure they know that don't do that, otherwise you might get punished. I remember doing this with another streamer, GL40 Lab Rat. I can't remember his name. Apologies if you're watching this. But ran into him on Crescent Falls, and he was on top of a spot that was not a bound spot. He didn't know about it. I told him about it. He didn't use it again. Simple as. There was someone else in his team. I don't remember what his name was, but he was found later on. We ran into them again in another out of bounds spot. But yeah, I went out of my way to tell him, and he didn't do it again. So that's fine. But yeah, I always just generally come away from this segment of the CLAYCAST with a message. It's just don't do it. It's not worth it. No matter how desperate you are to win in a video game, just don't bother with it. It's not worth it. Especially in games with very fair devs like Jaeger, who just want to make sure the environment of PvP or just their game as a whole is fair to everybody. Don't risk the suspension, even the account ban. Just don't do it. I just don't think it's worth it. And, just coming away from the fact alone that you didn't win the fight, within the intended boundaries of the game and how it's set, that you went out of those boundaries just to secure a cheap win. You know, it doesn't feel good. Trust me when I say when I was younger, I did that. It never felt good. I stopped doing that a long, long time ago when I was cheesing stuff like that too. It's a really, really hollow feeling. And the pixels you're ever going to receive, you're just going to lose anyways. So it's not worth putting the amount of importance you have, you know. Maybe it's a degree of gear fear. Maybe like gear fear, but it's warped into something else that they do this. I don't know. But yeah, either way, we're coming up on the 40-minute mark now. I think that'll cover this solo episode of the CLAYCAST. I appreciate you guys watching and tuning in. The next one, like I said, will probably come in about 3 weeks' time again. I want to try and give Season 3 a good try out. I want to try and get Bamba and Saiyan, ideally, two people with a lot more hours of cycle than me onto the CLAYCAST, so we can really have a good chat about it. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure you check out my live streams. I'm back into a regular schedule now. Make sure you do all the things where you click like, subscribe, comment, share the button, yabba, yabba, yabba. And I will see you guys in the next video. Good night, guys. Take care. Stay safe. Love you all. And peace.